What's up, guys? This is a weird movie review because it's a movie that came out 20-ish years ago.
Yeah, and also it's not one that, I mean, for all you history buffs out there, you'll appreciate this. Anybody else, I don't know. But
that's true.
Michael, since this is a movie you've had some history behind.
Oh, I like the pun.
Yeah, I'm full of puns today, I guess. Do you want us to tell, or do you want to tell a little bit about this movie?
Yes, so first I'll do the backstory. So, I am, or currently was, a college student at a local university, and one of the classes I took was history, World War II history and films. So we watched a lot of interesting films, whether it be propaganda films like the U.S. made back then to like make us look good, or like other films, other films after the war, you know, or like on the war in the Pacific. So one of the most interesting films that was not made during the time period, but was about the time period, is the title of this, Das Boot, or however you say that in German. So it follows a I was gonna say U2, and once I said that, it was just so funny. A U-boat or submarine.
Yes,
submarine.
The Irish band is on the boat.
I'm sorry, that's just funny. We're leaving it in. So it's a U-boat submarine series of submarines, and we're following one particular boat as their captain goes on a mission to kill, or I guess destroy convoys, British and American convoys, and then return, hopefully return safely. And you have a reporter on board who's part of the propaganda arm of the German military, trying to write a story about the Navy being heroes. And then you have a couple more interesting characters. You have like a bunch of new, young people. Then you have the captain who's kind of like grizzled and realizes the true situation they're in, I guess. Not to reveal too much, but it's history, so spoilers. And then you have a Hitler Youth character as well, who's like a second lieutenant. So, kind of has their journey. It's one of the really good movies at giving you like a feeling of claustrophobia, as like the people are in the submarine, you know, moving back and forth, dealing with threats, eating food, having like disease outbreaks on the ship. And overall, it was a very interesting experience. I watched it twice, so I actually wanted to show this movie.
Don't know how much of an undertaking that is.
It is a long movie. We got the director's cut, which is even longer. But yeah, I wanted to introduce this movie to Josh. And if you're into history movies, I think this is a really not only informative and interesting movie, but I think it's German made, and I think they made it in a way that showed history and made you understand what kind of it meant to be part of the German Navy in that time without necessarily glorifying them, which is good.
Yeah, I mean, just preface here, we watched all of the director's cut, which is nearly 5 hours, so if you do find the director's cut, just know it's an undertaking. But it was a very intriguing movie, because I don't think I've seen too many war, or specifically like World War movies, that have focused predominantly or solely on the Nazis' perspective. I've read a couple of books that kind of did, but this is the first movie that I can recall. And it was just really cool to see not only kind of how different the Navy was to like the Nazi Reich and like, you know, like the German government, because like I think it says, or at least it's like alluded, that the Navy is kind of at the bottom of the totem pole when it comes to like the Nazi army. So you definitely see that shown throughout the movie. I mean, I think one of the pluses of it, which it's one of those things that I think any country, whatever country's making a movie that's about like historical events, like they're going to put not necessarily a spin on it, but they're going to put some things in there where like, you know, they don't look necessarily 100% evil, which is good because that's not necessarily the case anyway, right? So I think seeing that, you know, that some of the soldiers that have been in the Navy and on this U-boat for a considerable amount of the war do not have that much high regard to like upper command, or at least not as diehard devotion to the Reich. So seeing that, you know, it's mostly just like they got their mission, they're going to go do their mission, but they're relying on themselves is a really cool aspect to see like their journey from start to finish. And I think also I really did like the use of the reporter character, because I think that is something that a lot of people maybe don't necessarily think about. But I mean, World War II was a pretty heavily documented war, especially when everything was going on. So I really did like seeing that, and just the portrayal of how they treat him, and just kind of what his status is in the ship, and then maybe the distaste that goes around because of it. But there's a lot of good scenes throughout the movie that kind of stand out. I mean, Michael, I'm sure you got your favorites since you've watched this several times. But I think there's definitely some lighthearted moments where you get to see just kind of the camaraderie of the crew of the ship, but then also kind of more of the, I guess, more drastic tensions between officers, and whether that's them on the boat or when they're interacting with the people that are off the ship as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, two moments, because I want to leave a couple other scenes for Josh to talk about that are enjoyable. Two things that stood out to me, even watching it a second time. First of all, they're under attack various times in the movie. And those scenes are always very intense because you don't know what's going to happen, and also just to experience like what would happen in a submarine if they got hit with the depth charge.
Yeah, because submarine, I think maybe I mentioned it when we were watching it, but submarine, especially like in a particular war, they don't really focus that much on, like, at least in movies, I haven't seen many where they really kind of go into the whole scope of the danger of it, right? I mean, there's pretty much like you're operating solely under like the pretenses that you have to stay incognito until you strike, and you better kill them on the first strike, or else you can be in some pretty dire circumstances. So the way they handle that is actually really good, I think, and it leads to some very tense moments. One thing that I actually because I was trying to think when we were watching this, I was like, when was sonar made? Because I'm pretty sure sonar was around, but like it had been invented, but I don't know if they had utilized it in the ships. And they do show that in the movie, because they did have it for a lot of their ships. But a cool thing though is that you do hear it, which I guess that's one thing I just either didn't know, I forgot because I've been out of school way too long, but that was cool seeing that you can actually hear it, and just the amount of dread again that they add to the tension of those scenes is really done well.
The other scene that's, I mean, again, there's a lot of great moments in the movie, but another thing that kind of, a moment that I remember, and it's a very solid moment, when they take out some ships and you get to see what, like, the aftermath or the ramifications of what they've done. The crew finally gets to see that these aren't unmanned boats that they're taking out. These are people's lives that are being lost.
Right.
And I think it finally hits, not necessarily enough to change their motivations, but it contrasts a lot with like the joy and all the elation they have when they actually hit a boat. That contrasts with the reality of what happens when a boat is being sunk and it's on fire.
I mean, it's kind of the same premise of like there's a certain level of, I don't know, what like distance you can put yourself in the situation when you're not really in it. I guess it's kind of the same thing of like the psychology of, it's a lot easier to shoot someone than it is to stab someone, because like you're really up in there, and you're like, it's a much more personable act. And I think the same thing can be said in those scenes when they actually do get to see like the ramification of their actions. But yeah, like we said, there is a lot of lighthearted moments. I mean, there's definitely one that is towards the beginning of the movie that just kind of sets the stage. I mean, there's like a party that they have like in occupied France before they leave. There's also a moment on the boat when everybody gets there that I don't know if it's just like a ritual they have when they were sailing out, or if they did just because they got a lot of new crew members. But there is a moment where they're playing some music, and it's not necessarily the music you would think Nazis would be playing. So that is a nice little moment there as well. But overall, I did really like it. Like I probably alluded to, I don't know that much when it comes to like the German Navy, because that's not one that's typically touched on, which was one of the reasons why this movie is so intriguing. But then again, I don't really know how historically accurate it is, but just from the amount of passion that went into the project, I was sure that they did some research. I think one of the things that most like hits hard very early on, as before the movie even starts. It has a statistic that there was like 40,000 people that were in the German Navy and only 10,000 actually came back. So right off the bat, there's not really that much room for some good things happening to these people. So you can imagine it's kind of like a Full Metal Jacket scenario where the tone changes pretty quickly.
Yeah, and on the first viewing, well, first of all, I guess I'll say this first. If you are interested in the topic or want to watch a movie about submarines, I think this is perfect for that, especially historical based one. But I think one of the interesting things about the movie is when you see the first scene, it can be kind of jarring because it starts with like a party, and you're like, oh, these people are acting illogically. Like, why are they like this? But by the end of the movie, you can kind of understand why on break they're so crazy. Because they have to deal with such bad circumstances when they're actually in the field. So. Yeah.
One other small thing that I'll mention before we get into like final thoughts here is, like Michael said, this movie is German made, and it does have like German track for audio, but it did also, I don't know if it was just the version we had, but there was different audio tracks that you could select. So I think it was in English and French and maybe one or two more audio options on there. And we watched majority of the film in German, but I will say for like the few minutes that we were having to watch it before like I figured out how to switch the track, it was in English, and the dub actually did sound pretty well. And I have to give props to dubs whenever we listen to them, and if they're good, because 99.9% of dubs are trash. So it's actually kind of nice, that, if for whatever reason you don't want it to be historically accurate, or it's just, your preference, or it's the only way that you're really able to enjoy the movie, then, it's not going to be a detriment to the overall experience. At least it seemed, decently done.
Yeah, for sure. So overall, it's kind of hard to set a rating to a historical movie. I mean, it's more of like, is it a good one or is it a bad one?
Yeah.
But overall, I think it's good. It's worth a watch. I think you can pick it up both digitally and probably physical on Amazon. So yeah, if you're up to watch a movie, or you've always been interested in history movies, I think this is a good one to check out, especially with World War II. If you're someone, I wouldn't say I'm a fanatic about World War II history, but I do like learning more about it. I think this is a good movie to watch, and it certainly sets a tone for what submarine life was like that you really don't find in many other films.
Yeah, I think one of the most intriguing things about specifically like World War movies is that there's just so many facets of that war, just because of how many years it went on, how many different parts of the world that had things happening, that it just for this movie brings just, I guess, a spotlight on another facet of that war that doesn't really get talked about a lot. So I think the people that really like war movies, and specifically, history surrounding World War II, will obviously find it the most enjoyable. But I think if you just like a good movie that has some historical significance, then I think you're going to enjoy it. I thought the only gripe that I could really give it is that it was pretty long, at least the version that I watched. But I think overall it is worth it in the end if you have the chance, or you can set aside like basically a whole day to watch it.
Yeah, and I think it has an ending that's not entirely predictable, but is interesting and kind of wraps up the movie in a nice bow, where you can think about all the characters and what happened to them and their circumstances. So
yeah, it's very rare, I think, now that you can watch something and see like almost like a whole journey, like you really feel like you saw a witnessing of like years, or like at least months spanned at a time, and it have like a whole cohesiveness to it. So really did like it. Would recommend it to you guys. Not necessarily think that this is in the main demographic of our channel, but whenever we see something and we feel like it's worth talking about, or it needs more spotlight, then we got to bring it to there. So That is this one. I'm sure you can check out some of our other war movies. I know we have at least a review of 1917, which is kind of in the same vein of this.
Weird
Different
movie.
World War, but yeah. It's got
A lot of running in that movie.
There was a lot of running, a lot of Red Rover kind of aspects as well. But anyway, guys, I guess we'll get out of here and we'll be on to the next video to see you in. So, that being said, Alex, peace.
Later.